Do you ever wonder why readers choose to read fiction? Like, psychologically, what is it about fiction that draws them in and gets them addicted to reading great novels? Well, maybe you've never considered that before. Maybe only psychology geeks like me sit around thinking about this. But I'm going to offer today that maybe you should think about it, because the reason that readers choose to pick up books rather than go do some other activity, it may surprise you. It might not be what you think. I have started teaching this in the past year, and no matter where I teach it, whether it's online at a workshop or, in person at a writer's conference, I always get at least one writer who comes up to me and says, "Wow, that was mind-blowing. I've never heard that before." And don't get me wrong, I think that most of us know this intuitively, but we don't talk about it. We don't teach it. We're not thinking consciously about it. And we need to, because it's probably a little bit different than what you're thinking it is. So we're going to talk today about that, why readers choose to read fiction above other kinds of activities, and why you need to take that into account when you are writing your story for the maximum amount of success that you can have as an author. So stay tuned. Hey there, fiction author. If you're done with files full of unfinished stories, struggling to fill in plot or get words down on the page, and immediately second-guessing everything you just wrote, even when you do, and you want the real secrets to writing fiction readers will absolutely love and gush about, you're in the right place. I'm Liesl, USA Today best-selling author of 4 genres, fiction coach, and story psychology geek. I teach authors to write highly emotional fiction that will resonate with readers, because that is the only path to bestsellership and eventually living off your fiction royalties. Want to hear more? Let's write some fiction. All right, so do you ever wonder what makes some stories just resonate? Like, why some stories immediately become so memorable and so successful, they become mainstream phenomenon, they become beloved classics, they draw so many just gushing fans, and other stories just don't. You ever wonder about that? I think people have wondered about this for a long time, and most often when I hear it discussed, it's really more in the discussion about how to create a best-selling story, right? And I've said this before for anybody who's followed me very long, but it always makes me a little bit annoyed because people don't really know the answer to this. And so they'll say things like, "Oh, it was just luck," or, "the stars aligned and everything just came together." Oh, guys, no. There is always a reason. There is always a logical, measurable reason for success. And I understand. I mean, I'm not totally ragging on people who say this, because the truth is there are a lot of variables that go into it and they just don't know what the reason is. It's too much to explain. A lot of times there are some non-tangible elements, so it's hard to quantify. So I get it, but that doesn't mean there isn't a reason. There's always a reason. And I remember I used to think about this when I first started out as a writer. I would think, how do I write a truly epic story? Now, I didn't always have the right lingo, right? The correct words to express what I meant. So I often used the word epic because that's how I would describe my favorite stories. Oh, that was epic. That was so amazing, right? And I wanted to know how I could write a story that would make other people say the same thing. Now, what I was really tapping into there was the reason that readers read fiction, but I just didn't have quite the words to express myself back then. But the point is, there is a reason that certain books stand out and resonate, and that readers run around telling people how epic they are, and other books that doesn't happen with. All right, so let's get into this a little bit. Why do readers buy books? I mean, what are the reasons that they actually choose to purchase and spend their time absorbed in fiction? I want you to think about a few answers to that. I'll give you like 10 seconds. Okay, you have a couple of answers. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to hear you tell me what they are, but from when I have asked this to people face-to-face and gotten feedback, most answers fall under the umbrella of one of what I call the 4 E's. There's education, enlightenment, escapism, and entertainment. So chances are your answer fits under one of those. And none of those are incorrect answers by any means, but I want you to go a little bit more high level than that, because technically readers could get all those things, education, enlightenment, escapism, entertainment, by doing other activities. They could get these by hanging out with friends, or, I don't know, playing miniature golf, or whatever else they might enjoy doing, right? So why do they specifically read fiction to get these things? Well, here it is. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you the reason that readers read books, the real reason. So lean in. Readers read fiction in order to feel big emotions in a safe space. I'm going to repeat that. Readers read fiction in order to feel big emotions in a safe space. Our fast-paced, instant gratification culture does not hold space for big emotions, does it? No, quite the opposite, in fact. We're always told to put a lid on our emotions, tamp them down, don't make a scene, don't be dramatic. So we are discouraged from even feeling our emotions, much less, expressing them or releasing them. But fiction has this unique capability to help us feel emotion. From an emotional health standpoint, human beings are meant to feel our emotions very deeply, very potently, and then to process them, which is just a fancy way of saying to make meaning out of them, and then to release them. Okay, that's what we should be doing with every single emotion that we feel. But none of us is taught to do this, are we? We weren't taught by our parents, they weren't taught by their parents, and on back, so none of us know how to do this. Now, I think more people are learning this now because the problem with this is becoming more mainstream. People are becoming more aware of it. But having emotions stuck in our body is what actually leads to illness, right? We get sick if we don't express our emotions, especially over years or decades. So it's very healthy for us to release our emotions. And I want you to take a minute and think about the experience of reading a well-written book. We ride along with the characters. We witness their story. We feel their emotions. We go on their journey with them. And right around the climactic moment in the story, we experience what's called a catharsis. Now, catharsis doesn't just mean feeling big emotions. It actually means releasing emotions. That's the textbook definition of a catharsis, is an emotional release. So you're actually doing your reader quite the service by writing highly emotional fiction. Because, again, due to our culture, most of them do not know how to process their emotions correctly, because none of us do. And it's actually a relief to them to be able to feel the catharsis. So we bottle up our emotions inside of us, right? And it starts to feel like a bottle of boiling water that has a cork on it, right? And the pressure builds up and it's uncomfortable. And then when we pop that cork, what happens? All the pressure releases and it's like, oh, that feels so much better, right? So that's kind of what it feels like to them on an emotional level when they hit that catharsis. We'll get back to the episode in just a minute, guys, but first, the only real way to master your craft as a fiction author is to deeply understand the nature of story and how every part of it fits together. And I want that for you. I want you to become a master storyteller. The chances of you making it big as an author increase exponentially when you master the nature of story, and the only way to do that is to practice. To that end, I invite you to join us in the Legendary Fiction Forge. Each month, we deconstruct a well-known story so that you can see how the parts and pieces fit together and apply it to what you're writing. You also get a mini lesson on how to craft some specific part of story. We have one on telling backstory through flashbacks and another on how to incorporate a secondary villain as part of your early story escalation. And coming up, we're going to do one on how to write a scene where you catch someone in a lie. Plus, you get access to the core workshop on Pacing 101 for fiction authors and 2 Q&As with me every month where you can ask me anything and get all of your concerns answered. You get all of that for just $37 a month, which I joke is cheaper than a dozen eggs these days. So if you are interested in this premium training for serious authors, if you're dedicated to mastering your fiction craft, so that creating stories that readers will absolutely love, that will resonate deeply with them, is second nature to you, go to bit.ly/fiction pacing. That's bit.ly/fiction pacing, or click the link in the show notes. So you can actually help your readers to be more emotionally healthy by writing a highly emotional story that guides them to that catharsis. Okay, so what does this mean for you, the author of your own fiction works? It means that it's your job to infuse every part of your story with emotion. And if you don't, chances are your story is not going to resonate with readers, and it's not going to sell very many copies, or as many as you would like, just depending on, what the level of emotion actually is. So you may think, well, that's obvious that I need to put emotion into my story, but it may not be as obvious as you think. Let's talk about what this actually means, because whatever you're thinking it means, whatever infuse your story with emotion means to you, it may not be incorrect, but it's probably only one way of many. There are actually many, many levels that we need to do this on, okay? Making your story emotional does not just mean making your characters more emotional. Have them laugh more, have them cry more, have them get more excited. It also does not mean throwing in more emotionally devastating plot twists. Those are both fine if they are done correctly, and they are one way, or two ways, I guess, to up the emotional ante, but they by far are not the only ways. And really, I want to talk today about something that is kind of a non-obvious way to infuse your story with emotion. And it's actually what I've been talking about in a lot of ways this whole time. But what I mean, it has less to do with the story itself, with like the plot or the characters, and it has a lot more to do with the reader. I'm talking about crafting your story based on psychology. Yes, story psychology, reader psychology, but even just basic human psychology. Because all readers absorb and process story in exactly the same way. And if you can craft your story in a way that works with, rather than against, a reader's natural enjoyment of story, then they're going to experience the emotions of your book on an exponentially higher level than if you don't pay attention to this. And I got news for you. No story ever made it big, ever became a beloved bestseller or a mainstream phenomenon, unless it was very heavy on the emotions it made its readers feel. Okay? So, you want to succeed as a fiction author? I assume you do, if you're listening to my podcast. To do that, you have to master your story craft, which is synonymous with saying you have to master the emotion in your story. And it's important to note that every single thing we point at as being a weakness in our writing, from flat characters to stale plot to even editing, can be traced back to a lack of emotion. Let me show you what I mean. If the inner arc of your character is lacking, you're going to have a real hard time getting your reader to feel the catharsis. Okay, the emotions of the catharsis are all tied to the inner arc. If the plot does not follow the way that all humans absorb story, then the reader is not going to feel the emotions of the journey, and they're not going to want to keep turning pages. Using the emotions of the journey is how you create a page turner. And if you have a lot of passive voice in your manuscript, that makes it so it's difficult for the reader to connect to the emotion of the story on a sentence level, because there's too many extra words in the way, and the structure of the sentence makes it hard to connect with the meaning of the sentence. And even when it comes to basic things like typos, we all say that, a reader will be flying along reading our story and they hit a typo and it jerks them out of the story, right? That's a common way for us to describe it. But why does that happen, and why is it such a problem? Because when they're experiencing the story, just flowing through it, they are feeling the emotion of the story. And when they hit that typo, it interrupts the emotion of the story when it jerks them out of it. So it's all about the emotion or the lack of emotion. You see what I mean? Every single thing that we see as a story weakness that we need to get better at, craft a better story, edit better, all of that. I think you could even probably trace this to why we like certain book covers over others. We talk about contrast, we talk about colors that pop, high quality images, but those create they create a five sensory experience, but that creates emotion in a reader on a sensory level. Okay, so all things come back to emotion. So, as I said before, this is just not something that we talk about nearly enough and not something that we teach, but now you know. Now you've heard this and you know better, which means that it's now your responsibility to make sure that your stories are as emotional as you can make them. That's how you write great stories. That's how your stories become bestsellers. That's how you serve your readers. That's how you create story satisfaction for yourself in writing the story. And let's touch on that quickly. If you've ever gotten bored with the story, if it feels like it's dragging and you just don't know where to go with it and you're not excited to write it anymore, the reason that happens is because you have lost the emotion of the story. And we've all experienced that thing where we get to this point, we've sort of lost our steam on a story and we're not really that excited to write it anymore, but then something happens. Either we write a super juicy scene, or maybe we come up with something for the plot that we didn't have before, and it just reinvigorates that story for us, right? New life is breathed into that story, and suddenly we're super excited to get back to writing it. Well, why does that happen? Because you just tapped back into the emotion of your story. And you guys, it's totally possible to do this on purpose, right? It's totally possible to have a story that's gone stale and then you purposely just tap into the emotion to reinvigorate the story for yourself, okay? I do that all the time and I can teach you how. But the point is, it's the emotion that makes you want to write your stories. It's the emotion that makes the reader want to read your stories. It's the emotion, more than anything else, no matter what the marketers say, that will turn your story into a bestseller and a timeless classic. It's the emotional experience that the reader is looking for and that will make them come back to you time and time again to buy whatever you write because they know that you can give them that cathartic experience, and that is what readers yearn for. So, back to the first question I asked at the beginning. Do you ever wonder what it is that makes some stories just resonate? The answer is it's the emotion. And filling your story with emotion is both an art and a skill that is very learnable. All right? So that's where we're going to cut off today. This is one of 4 foundational teachings that I'm going to be putting out episodes about in the next couple of weeks. And they're things that you've probably heard a little bit piecemeal on the podcast before, but I wanted to do some episodes that were very clear and simple and straightforward about these foundational concepts. I like to call them the 4 essential keys to writing great fiction that no one's ever told you before, because these are things that are just not discussed very highly in the industry. But as the world becomes more aware of energy and spirituality and emotions and how all of these things tie together, we can tap into this to write better stories. And not only will that serve us better on a creative level and our readers better on an emotional level, it is what is also going to get us the sales we want so that we can be financially stable in our author careers. And that's what most of us are hoping for eventually, right? So, we're going to end there. If you are interested in mastering storycraft and doing so by deconstructing stories and just getting practice at that, I would invite you to join us inside the Legendary Fiction Forge. That's what we do there. We learn storycraft, we deconstruct stories, we have many lessons on different aspects of writing, all of that. All right. So this is a training for serious authors who are dedicated to mastering their craft and eventually dominating their market. So I will put the sign up link for that in the show notes if that's something you're interested in checking out. Beyond that, everybody have a wonderful week of writing. Do your best to get as much emotion into your writing as you possibly can. And I will be back soon. Thanks so much for being here with me and for listening to the Fiction Author Business School podcast. Thanks for listening today. If this episode helped or inspired you in any way, would you do me a solid and leave me a review? Reviews help other fiction authors find the podcast. You could also recommend it to a writer friend of yours so they can get the same inspiration you got. Remember, you have a story inside you that only you can tell. So get out there and write your soul story. because your readers are waiting for it with bated breath.